everything that's happening right now is being recorded, including his voice and your voices.
Okay. Hi everyone, so my name is William Blackwell, and today I'm going to be giving my TOK presentation on derivative thought. So, to start off, I want to show a video showing the similarity between two songs, Robin Thicke and Pharrell Williams' Blurred Lines and Gotta Give It Up by Marvin Gaye. Alright, so what you just saw was, of course, a clip comparing the two. So in 2013, Robin Thicke and Pharrell Williams Blurred Lines hit over 25 countries' #1 on their music charts. Now, despite its popularity, there was a lot of controversy surrounding the song. Particularly, first off, the song had claims that it was sexist and it trivialized sexual content. But according to a lot of people who study music, it also copied Marvin Gaye's Gotta Give It Up. And this was taken to court by the Gaye estate, who acted on behalf on Marvin Gaye. And in 2015, a jury decided that Robin Thicke and Pharrell Williams had to pay the Gaye estate over $5 million in damages for copyright infringement. So, what this real-life situation creates is it creates the knowledge question: how does derivative thought create new knowledge? Now, in order to understand this knowledge question, first we actually have to define what derivative in derivative thought is. So, derivative itself means imitative of the work of another person and usually disapproved of for that reason. So it's going to incorporate elements of pre-existing knowledge or work into the new existing knowledge or work. Now, this is different from innovative, importantly, because innovative is introducing new ideas and being creative in thinking. Keep that in mind. Now, how does the real-life situation actually relate to the knowledge question? Well, there was support from both sides over whether derivative thought, in this case, Pharrell Williams and Robin Thicke copying from Gotta Give It Up, actually created a new song. Support for Thicke, mainly a bunch of newer artists, filed an amicus curiae, which is basically support in a legal case for one side, claiming that, yes, while it did borrow parts of Gotta Give It Up, this was still a new song because music borrows from each other all the time, and therefore new knowledge. However, there was support for Gaye as well, mainly older singers such as Smokey Robinson, a famous Motown singer, that argued that this was a straight ripoff of Gotta Give It Up, and that there was no new knowledge actually be created. It was just a rehash of the pre-existing knowledge. Now, the whole argument over here is whether over derivative thought actually does create new knowledge, as can be seen by the two arguments. Now, Blurred Lines was claimed to copy the groove of Gotta Give It Up. So not necessarily its lyrics or anything like that. There were still stark differences between the song, but there were still similarities, and there was still derivative thought at play in creating Blurred Lines. Now, the two main ways of knowing that contributed to this were sense perception and imagination. Particularly sense perception is how Thicke and Pharrell would have heard Gotta Give It Up and then copied it, and imagination would have been at hand in creating the new parts of the song. So, let's discuss for a second. Oh, you're fine. How does derivative thought provide improvements on pre-existing knowledge, if at all?
Well, I feel like in the example that you brought up, you made sure to touch on the fact that there are changes and new additional parts being added to the new song. So it was like the bass line and sort of the drum riff throughout both songs were fairly similar. But the lyrics are different, and I don't know, the message and the way the songs sound are different.
Yeah, exactly. Even though there's derivative thought at play in creating that new knowledge, in supposedly creating new knowledge, there's also some differences between what knowledge actually was based in. Additionally, why is derivative thought treated with a negative connotation if it's providing improvements on pre-existing knowledge, supposedly?
Well, I think the key word there is it's the take on it. Like an improvement, maybe improvement to one person, while another person sees it as you changed the song from what it actually meant. You made it a different way. So, for example, the original song may have been received well by a certain number of people and not liked by a lot of other people, while the newer song, not the derivative song, is received well by a lot of people, but there's that minority that still doesn't like it for that very reason. So I guess it depends on which group and which party you're in.
Yep.
I'd like to add that there's also a sense of ownership over your work. When you create something, something pride that you took the time to make something, and when someone takes your ideas and even changes them or adds their own spin, there's the sense of you're taking credit for what I did.
Yeah, but, oh, sorry.
So no, go ahead.
Yeah, but like when we are in elementary school and stuff, and we're like, oh my god, they copied my artwork. I've been told at least that like, oh, it's an honor that someone's copying your work because you have good work and they're trying to build off of that.
That's an inspiration.
Okay, I'm gonna cut in because we have to move on. But yes, there's that inherent issue where there's the knowledge and people copying your own knowledge is of course stealing your idea. But at the same time, there's also theoretically providing improvements on knowledge and taking from other knowledge through supposedly derivative thought and making those improvements. Now, this situation creates two main arguments. The first argument is that derivative thought helps to create new beneficial knowledge. This would have been the argument of the thick and Pharrell side, that blurred lines, despite its similarities, and that drew from Gotta Give It Up, still create a new song and new knowledge that was different from Gotta Give It Up. Now, argument two, however, is that derivative thought doesn't create new knowledge. This would have been the argument of the gay estate and its supporters, that it was simply a rehash of Gotta Give It Up, and there was no new knowledge actually created. It was simply copied. Now, let's look at a perspective on this. So, specifically in pop music, we'll look at blurred lines here. It's cultural tradition for mainstream music to tend to borrow from other mainstream music. Now, this can be seen in one of two ways in both arguments. First off, there's argument one that it does create new knowledge, and how we can look at this is that since mainstream music borrows from other mainstream music, it's theoretically trying to provide improvements on that mainstream music and bring that mainstream music to a newer audience in sampling, and that it's creating new knowledge through that derivative thought. However, you can also see it from the other side of this perspective, that since it's tending to borrow from other mainstream music, it's trying to call back to the popularity of that mainstream music, and then it's simply trying to emulate or copy it, rather than create and produce new knowledge. Now, this begs the question, is there an incentive to using derivative thought in music?
I mean, I think that an important thing to note is that there's a finite number of rhythms, beats, and chord patterns that you can follow in a song. I don't think there's an infinite number that you can just, every single song in the original, I feel like the rhythm in a lot of, like, I think a video was played in class where there's, yeah, the Axis of Awesome, where they have a bunch of different songs follow the exact same chord pattern and chord progression. And similarly, you want to follow that pattern if it's going to make you successful. I think the ingenuity of music comes from the lyrics rather than the chord pattern, and that's, in that sense, there's an incentive that you know what beat's popular, and you know that if you use it, it'll become popular as well.
Well, for instance, I can see both sides to that, because at the same time, yes, there are who's heard of the 4 chords of pop music? Yes, those 4 chords are statistically proven to be appeasing to the ear, and that's why they're so inherent in pop music. But I want to use a sample from Kanye West, actually, produced his album 808s and Heartbreaks. Sounded like nothing that was ever in rap or pop music before. And while it wasn't too popular at the time, it had a couple of hits such as Heartless. Does everybody know who like Juice WRLD and Little Pump, all those people are nowadays? 808s and Heartbreaks pretty much 808s and Heartbreaks pretty much pioneered that entire era of rap music. So by creating something that was completely different and not derivative at all, Kanye West actually engineered a new part of rap music and a new genre that's now popular today. Now, let's look at another thing in pop music, sampling. Listen to this. So, that is a part of a sample from Fab Five Freddy's Change the Beats. Now, Fab Five Freddy's Change the Beat was a very popular rap song, and it's been sampled over 2,300 times. It's the most sampled song in music history. Now, for anybody who doesn't know what a sample is, it's basically using other music in your own music. Now, this begs the question, and I want to open this to discussion first. Why actually sample it?
Kind of. I don't call it iconic. It's so memorable. Like we've all heard that like record scratch so many times.
It sounds, it's catchy. It hooks you in the song.
Exactly. We've all heard that record scratch. We all know that that record scratch is something iconic in music. So why does Bieber call back to that record scratch? Because he's setting himself on the same level as Fab Five Freddy. He's saying, I'm in the music industry just like Fab Freddy was. He's being derivative in the sense that he's taking something that is popular and well known and that is known to be established in the music industry, and he's incorporating it into his own work. In this sense, you can think that derivative thought doesn't create new knowledge, much like the gay estate would have argued in the Blurred Lines example, because he's simply trying to draw from the popularity of Fab Five Freddy's Change the Beat. Now there's the other argument that of course he could just be, using it to kind of rehash it to a new audience and to create a new song incorporating it. And yes, that would be argument one, as we discussed earlier, that it is, derivative thought does create new knowledge. Now, there are multiple perspectives that can be taken away when we consider sampling as well. So there's the historical side of it, where sampling wasn't even possible before the creation of recorded sound. Now, and this means that back then, say in the early days, you wouldn't have actually been able to use samples, and therefore somebody incorporating other music into you incorporating somebody else's music into your own work was seen more of an argument two style thing, where you're just copying them because there was no such thing as samples. However, as samples become more prevalent, it's more kind of acceptable, and we see more samples. For instance, you guys see the samples of Kanye picture on the right. That is, of course, a parody on Kanye's The Life of Pablo, which, despite being an extremely popular album, 16 of its 20 songs include samples. Now, additionally, there's the cultural tradition side, perspective on this, where hip-hop itself was created by sampling. It was a product of sampling, meaning that something seemingly derivative, where you're just taking old songs and mashing them together and changing them up, actually became innovative in that it pioneered a new entire genre of music. Now, let's discuss, is sampling itself innovative or derivative?
I would say if you're able to take a sample from another song, completely put it in a different genre or a different context, like if you're taking something from a sad song or like a ballad, a slow song, and you put that in something like a more fast-paced song, you're using that same material but using it in a new way, and I would say that's definitely innovative. But if you're using the same sample into the same genre, I wouldn't say that's innovative at all. I'd say that's more derivative because you're using it the same way twice.
I mean, but let's think about the gay example. Whereas gay was more of an R&B type thing, Robin Thicke was arguably more pop. Those are two different genres of music, and they obviously have very different lyrics, considering Blurred Lines' sexual connotation with its lyrics.
And, well, in that case, yes, they're different genres, but still the actual music itself sounded the same, which is a point where you could say that different genres do overlap, and in that sense, the argument that derivative thought between different genres is innovative, the argument there kind of collapses because they're the same sounding music, even though they're different genres.
Yes, but there's still that innovation of creating something new.
That's true.
Which is and anyway, I want to move on to the next question. How is sampling different from derivative thought?
I say that the act of sampling something, like just taking someone else's work and using it in your own is derivative, but when you build something off and make a new song, you add your own lyrics, add your own melody, then it becomes innovative. But, and like that's how it's different when because you're using it as a basis for something else, it becomes innovative versus derivative where it's just you took something from someone else.
Okay. I want to move on to my outcome, which is in the area of knowledge of natural sciences. Basically, everybody knows the party drug ketamine. Despite having adverse side effects, it has actually been studied by scientists and proved to help treat depression. And recently, the FDA has approved Spravato, which is a nasal spray, which actually helps to treat depression. And it works successfully. It works for people who actually haven't been able to treat depression in any other way. Now, Let's discuss. Is this innovative or derivative? And there is a right answer here.
I would say that in the context of like natural sciences, like taking someone else's work and then improving on it further, using it for different, like extending it, using it for different purposes is definitely innovative. Like if you find someone's theory, you improve it and apply it to something else, then that's absolutely innovative. There's no way that could be like negative.
You're absolutely right, because this is very innovative in the sense that they took some research and they looked at like the research of what the drug does to the brain, and they were able to apply it in a different scope where it was able to do something beneficial and it was able to be used in a new sense. Now, there is still the derivative aspect that they were both involved in ketamine and studies of how the ketamine affects the brain, yet they were both innovative in the way that, or yet it was innovative in the way that actually produced something beneficial. Now, let's discuss again. What draws the line between innovative and derivative thought? If anything.
How much it's the new thought has changed. Like, if you take some, if you take a sample of so much music and you don't change the song much at all, like with blurred lines, then it's very derivative. But if you change it like extremely, like with your natural science example, then it's innovative. So
Yeah, but how do you know what the line is? How do you know when it's just a little bit of changing and when it's a lot? Like if you change the lyrics or if you change, I don't know, like the melody?
Well, I want to look back at that Justin Bieber example. He only used like less than 2 seconds of Fab Five Freddy's change the beat. Yet, it's seemingly derivative in that he's just trying to establish himself on the same level as Fab Five Freddy. He's just trying to call back to Fab Five Freddy. The song itself is extremely different, but the intent behind it seems derivative. Now, let's move on to the next question then. Does derivative thought actually add anything to its root knowledge? Yes, why yes?
because it's even when you're taking something like you're saying something or you're taking something someone else's research, you're still adding to it and therefore creating something new from that.
Yeah, I think it's to add to Glue, I think in order for you to do derivative, it has to add something. Otherwise, it's just a direct copy of it. I don't think we've come into a case where a direct copy is derivative.
Mhm.
So I think it has to be derivative because all these people have just been they've taken it and they've slightly changed it. They've changed the context. They've changed the octave. I think in Blurline's case, that's what they did. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, and then in the ketamine, they just absolutely changed the usage case. So I think
Mhm.
you have to change it in order for it to be derivative. So in that case, it is.
Yeah, let's look at blurred lines for a second, sorry. And while maybe it was derivative thought and creating blurred lines from Gotta Give It Up, it did add stuff to its new knowledge, and obviously it added something that arguably was beneficial to society since it was very popular and hit #1 in over 25 countries. Arguably, it was very popular knowledge, and it was creating something that added to its root knowledge. Yet there's a question of whether, in being derivative thought, it actually created new knowledge, just rather than sort of expanding on the pre-existing knowledge, so to speak. And final question, can knowledge be both derivative and innovative?
I would say yes, absolutely. Going back to the natural sciences area of knowledge, in almost every case, when a scientist, like, it's even encouraged in the scientific community to redo someone else's experiment completely the same way and see if you get different results. You're doing the same experiment, you're in a way copying and taking all of their work and seeing if you get different results. And even though you're using the same thing, you're still verifying it, adding validity to it. And yes, it's derivative, but it's innovative because you're making the case stronger.
Yes, sorry. Now you see that divide where there's derivative thought, and it can be incorporated with innovation, but there's still the argument as to whether derivative thought creating new knowledge, derivative thought actually adds to that innovation, like would have been argued in argument 1 versus argument 2 that doesn't. And so, how does derivative thought create new knowledge? Well, first, we really have to remember that innovative and derivative thought are two different things. There are two very stark differences between the two, while they can kind of be blended together. Additionally, we must consider how new knowledge itself distinguishes itself from pre-existing knowledge. So we got to look at the differences. Like in blurred lines, the whole case was that there were still some differences between Gotta Give And finally, remember that similar qualities don't mean a replication of knowledge. Just because two things share similar qualities doesn't mean they're the same, like in kind of mean example. Thank you.
You hit it?
Yep.
Goes by pretty quickly, doesn't it?
Yep.
Okay, let's give him a second round of applause. He's the first junior. From what I gathered today, I think you're the first junior in the whole school.
No, I think Miss
Delacorte
Delacorte
started? Oh, she's done 4, right? She's done 4.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I need for you guys to do, let me just actually shut this down. What I need you guys to do now is, and this is the first time you've done it, maybe talk with somebody near you who is about to grade Galila.